Hello and welcome to Voice Breakdown, the show where we teach you how to imitate some of the most iconic voices. Well, it's that time again for yet another Terminator movie. Terminator Dark Fate hits theaters this month, so we thought it was fitting to do the voice of the Terminator, the Governator, the Schwarzenegger. Is there a more iconic action star than Arnold Schwarzenegger?
You're a choir boy compared to me. I'm a cop, you idiot.
With such blockbuster films as the Terminator series, Predator, Kindergarten Cop, Jingle All the Way, Batman and Robin, The Expendables, and so much more, Schwarzenegger has solidified himself as one of Hollywood's most beloved actors. We love him for his crazy action sequences, his one-liners, being incredibly strong, and of course, his voice.
Bring it down.
Component number 1, the vocal cords. Arnold has a low-pitched voice. Slide that voice down until it is at the bottom of your range, but not so low that it goes into vocal fry. His voice will rise in pitch a bit as he gets angry or excited, but these changes are minimal. As we will discuss more when we talk about prosody, Arnold has very minimal pitch changes. Instead of raising his pitch, he tends to just raise his volume. So try to keep a relatively consistently low pitch.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
Component number 2, the larynx. Arnold's voice definitely has some depth to it. This depth and darkness is partially accomplished by the lowering of the larynx.
It's not a tumor.
In general, we want a neutral to low larynx position. There is an exception to this, however. We all know that Arnold grunt yell that everyone loves to imitate.
Get down! We gotta go out of here!
When this happens, the back of the tongue will pull back, more on that later, and the larynx will raise. This will enable us to get some epiglottic distortion. Refer all the way back to episode 2 for more information on that. We can also use the false vocal cords a bit to get some distortion. But back to the larynx, this raising of the larynx during these grunts or yells creates a quick change in resonance that gives us that classic Arnold sound. Component number 3, the tongue. The tongue needs to be pulled backward and downward for Arnold's voice. This causes both a darker quality to the voice, but also that clenched sound we sometimes hear. As we just mentioned when speaking about the larynx, we need to really pull this tongue back and clench it a bit during those grunting, yelling lines, he says.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age! Shut up!
Component number 4, the soft palate. Many of our voices have had a lower soft palate to allow for some nasal resonance, but Arnold's voice actually lacks a lot of that resonance. Instead, we want to raise and round the soft palate. This, combined with the low larynx and the low, unchanging pitch, gives him that more Arnold-y sound. There will always be some nasal resonance, especially on nasal sounds such as and but try to make this voice have primarily oral resonance.
Of course, I'm a Terminator. No problemo.
Component number 5, articulation. Articulation is a crucial component for Arnold's voice. First, let's focus on his TH sounds. It is very common for him to turn his voiceless TH into a T, and his voiced TH into a D, D. Next, we need to talk about his sounds. Arnold's speech is very non-rhotic. He simply doesn't say at the ends of syllables and words. This goes for the sound by itself, or also during what we call R-colored vowels. These are vowels that transition to like air, r, or, and ear. He tends to turn the part of these sounds into or sounds. Here becomes here. War becomes war. Sometimes he even changes the vowel before the sound, or can sound like ooh, ooh. Lastly, we need to talk about his lack of vowel simplification. Native English speakers tend to do what is often referred to as vowel simplification. This is when vowels, typically those that are part of an unstressed or unemphasized syllable, are not pronounced as the pure vowel, but are instead reduced or simplified to an easier vowel. This often ends up being an I, or sound. These sounds don't require a lot of tongue movement to produce. For example, when we say America, the first letter and the last letter are both A, but instead of being pronounced as A or Ah, these sounds are often simplified to making this word America. Arnold does not do this, however. He keeps the vowels more pure or distinct. Let's use a word to exemplify this. He was the governor of California, or as he would say, the governor of California. That first I is often reduced to or I, California or California. Arnold says California, California, California. Also, you'll notice the lack of R sound in the fornia half of the word.
The governor of California. We are going to play a wonderful game of who is your daddy and what does he do. You are not sending me to the cooler.
Component number 6, prosody. Arnold has a very unique prosody. His pitch changes are very minimal. If you try to actually trace out the notes, so to speak, of his voice, you will notice that they are in a fairly small range most of the time. So aim for a more monotone tone of speaking. Still, we can all think of times when Arnold is very intense.
Get to the chopper! Get to the chopper!
In order to get that intensity, however, he primarily just gets louder and uses some distortion. There is a slight pitch rise, sure, but use volume changes, distortion, and the larynx rising we discussed earlier when trying to give his voice more intensity. Otherwise, keep it nice and even-keeled.
Allow me to break the ice. Come with me if you want to live. I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue of a metal endoskeleton.
Let's recap. Component number 1, the vocal cords. We want to have a low pitch that doesn't slip into vocal fry. Component number 2, the larynx. The larynx should stay lowered except for when yelling or grunting. Component number 3, the tongue. Pull the back of the tongue backward and downward. Also, clench it a bit during yelling and grunting. Component number 4, the soft palate. Raise the soft palate to have his voice mainly comprised of oral resonance. Component number 5, articulation. Make sound like t, sound like d, drop and make it sound like or and don't simplify other vowels. Component number 6, prosody. Keep the prosody relatively monotonous, but increase the volume and distortion with slight pitch changes to show excitement instead of drastic pitch changes. Thank you for watching New York Speech Coaching's Voice Breakdown, episode 27. Be sure to check out future episodes of Voice Breakdown, the show where we teach you how to imitate some of the most iconic voices. See you next time.
I'll be back. Hasta la vista, baby. It's not a tumor.